these days there seems to be a really big conversation around personal brand and how you look and what you stand for. Is that something that you're conscious about in your daily living? Is it just part of your DNA and you just use your moral compass as your guide for how you live your life? It seems that lots of people almost trying to turn it into something perhaps bigger than it really is.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on is so prudent for today, isn't it, with social media and the rise of social media?
Well, and I think that's really, it's blown up because of that, hasn't it?
And you know, I have to talk about myself for 1 second and say, actually, maybe some of the opportunities that I have gotten probably may not have come about if social media didn't exist. No. So
it exposes you to people and situations that wouldn't normally happen.
And I certainly, you know, I certainly wouldn't say that hard work is hard work. You'll get recognised whenever it is, but it just seems as if it's a lot more accessible now. I think what your question was about personal brand. I think it's funny, isn't it? I can honestly say I never set out there to make a personal brand. I wasn't out there to be like, oh, I'm going to be SK or Dr. Shiraz Khan. There was none of that. I mean, I qualified in dentistry and I just focused on being the best person I could be. Now, people say in all these lectures, oh, you need to be unique, you need to be individual, you need to. It's like your fingerprint is individual to who you are, right? You can't create that, you can't copy it in any way.
But also it has to be authentic.
Yeah.
You know, if we all know when you meet somebody who's genuine and someone who's trying to present a particular style or way of being things. I think if it's not core to who you are, the integrity and the congruence just falls apart.
And people sense that straight away. If you're not about something, or you know, you talk a big game, but when it comes to backing up with actions, you can't do. People can it writes you off.
But also, it's in every dimension of your life. You know, you can't just go into an environment and say, well, for this situation, I'm going to be like this, and then that not carry through with everything. Because, and again, it goes back to social media. You know, people get to see you as often as you want to present yourself online, but also you become three-dimensional. They get to know more than just, you know, Dr. Khan the dentist, sure, but they get to see other things about you as well. And they want to know that it all joins up and feels congruent.
And I think what you're touching on is, again, brings back to the conversation we had on another video about being human. You are a human, you're not a robot. There's going to be a day probably where a robot can prepare a tooth better than I can. I'm sure that's going to come as a day. But the fact of the matter is you are a human being. Dentists are human beings. Patients like human beings. People like human beings. And provided that you're giving an opportunity to show what you are as a person, and albeit remain professional and have integrity with whatever you're doing, you know, I don't think it's appropriate to have necessarily, you know, inappropriate posts or pictures adjunct to clinical, if that's what you want to do. If you want to keep your life private in that way, that's fine. But if you're presenting yourself as a professional, I think there's a huge duty to make sure you remain professional in whatever walk of life you consider it. But yeah, back to the comment about, I never wanted to be a personal brand. I never decided to be a personal brand. I just decided to be me and be open and accessible.
But I think if you stand for something, it helps. I think it gives people more depth as to who you are and what you're about, because that's what people are really looking for these days.
And I sit there and say I didn't make a brand. I wasn't intending for that. Then naturally came as a progression, because what happened was I started getting identified as an individual. People asked me to start doing talks and whatever, and then I decided actually I do want a brand, so I got a logo made and stuff. And I don't think that's a be-all and end-all scenario. I don't think you need a logo to be a dentist, but it just seemed like the brand that was being created, which was totally organic.
But it fed out of a situation. You didn't start and say, right, I'm going to present myself in this way. It was just, as time went on, you started to be recognised. You know, you started to go about things in a particular way, and out of that, a certain style came.
That's right. And I think that, you know,
which feels quite a nice way for it to come. Yeah,
exactly. So it's, rather than, you know, trying to force your way through a door, a pathway opens. You know, and for me, and for all the viewers, the young dentists that might be watching or whatever, I think that's so important. Work on the bread and basics, work on being you, work on being a great clinician, a great communicator, understand the realms of business. And yes, if a brand comes as a homologation of all of that, fabulous. If it doesn't, you're not a failure as a dentist because you don't have a logo. I think that's what you've got to understand. So.